Hello, welcome back to Soullight Reflections, you beautiful, amazing people, whoever you are that listen to this. I am really excited to be back on my podcast recording grind. Today's episode is a little bit different. It's not necessarily like a specific teaching moment or topic that I have in mind. I mean, I guess it actually is a little bit of a topic, but it's essentially me sharing a dream that I had last night that kind of shook me, but like in a really beautiful way. It felt like it carried a lot of meaning. And then when I woke up and I wrote it out, which I don't usually do for my dreams, I realized like just how powerful this message was. And it just felt like it needed to be shared out into the world. So here I am sharing it out into the world with you. I guess I am curious if this resonates with you or if you've had wild dreams like this. This felt like a true initiation. It felt like a dream of like, you've made it, here you are, and like, yes, the journey isn't necessarily over, but you have made it to where you're supposed to be right now. Something that feels important to say, which will come back around at the very end, is that right before I went to bed last night, I ended up throwing up for the first time in like 3 or 4 weeks during this pregnancy. I am well past the first trimester. I've been feeling a tiny bit nauseous here and there, but nothing crazy. Definitely not enough to feel like I'm going to actually throw up. And it came out of nowhere. Like I brushed my teeth and then I immediately was like, I have to vomit now. And it was violent. Like it was not pretty. And it felt so like a power surge going through my body. And I was so caught off guard by it. And then I was like energized afterwards. I'm like, oh my gosh, wait a second. It felt like such a deep release. But I just was like, okay, well, that was weird. You know, it's a pregnancy symptom. And I just like rebrushed my teeth, mouthwash, and then went in bed and did a meditation. So anyway, now we get back to what I was saying. It was really a deep look into my subconscious mind, which was actually really cool and a little bit uneasy when I was in the dream. Essentially, I woke up and I immediately started typing in my phone everything I could remember about this dream. And I shared it with ChatGPT and I gave it a very clear prompt, which I'll share with you in a moment. And the interpretation ended up being so layered and complex and beautiful that I knew I needed to share it here because I think that this is actually a really good tool that more people could be using. I think that ChatGPT and AI is so overused, but I also think that it can be very helpful for certain things in life if we're using it with a lot of intention. Now, this particular dream, it seems to have happened before. It seemed like really like a familiar concept, and even some of the places seemed familiar, but maybe not in like the exact same situations or buildings. Basically, what ends up happening is I always end up exploring so many different doors and hallways and peeking into different rooms in like really, really big buildings or complexes. And a lot of times in these dreams, I like go to try to turn on a light switch and it might turn on like the lights in the room behind me. But if I want to keep making my way, I actually end up having to step into the darkness because the light switch didn't work for what was in front of me. And usually I start off with familiar people in these dreams, but they're not necessarily familiar to me like in this lifetime. Like they're more just familiar to my dreaming self. And in this particular one, I started out with classmates, which I'll get into in a second. But at some point, I always go off on my own and then I can never find my way back to where I was. I always find my way to like new places, which usually feels really scary and uneasy, but then it like turns out totally fine. Like not necessarily always really good and gooey and juicy feeling, but like not bad. And I feel like even just me describing that part without actually explaining what the dream was to you, you're probably already like, okay, I see where a lot of this like subconscious stuff is going. You can already probably read me like a book. However, I am going to dive really deep into this. Now, I want to preface this by saying I always, every single night, have really, really complex, visual, vivid, intense dreams. They're not necessarily like always good or bad. They're just like very visceral, like reactions. Now, I want to start off by saying that I am a dreamer. Ever since I met Max, my dreams have like gotten 10x more vivid, more real, more intense. It's actually really freaking cool. I can wake up every single day and remember my dreams and like speak them out loud. And I can still see them as I am explaining my dreams. And some nights I wake up completely exhausted because I literally felt like I was dreaming all night. And I've actually tracked this before, and I get way more REM sleep than like the quote unquote average person. So it makes sense. But I actually am not great about writing down my dreams and like really going through and interpreting them. But when I woke up from this dream last night, I immediately knew that I needed to dive deep into this. This was like not even a choice. It was like, get your phone out or your journal and write it down right now, because this is really important. This has a lot of codes that need to be unlocked. And it was really exciting. I was like, oh, okay, like I'm going to listen to this because this is obviously very important. So let's get into the dream itself. And then I'm going to like walk you through my conversation with chat. So during this dream, I was at a university, and it was like our last day as a class. And I was in some sort of like medical grad school program, which is kind of relevant because I graduated with my occupational therapy master's degree, but it wasn't OT. It was like more medical than that. And we went through like some, classic last day formalities, and we were supposed to have some sort of like closing circle and like a pizza party. And there was a little bit of downtime, and people had kind of like wandered in and out and like checked out other rooms. And so I decided to do the same. And I left the room that we were gathered like a few different times. I didn't go very far. Usually they're like pretty short ventures. And I didn't really remember how, but I was able to make it back to the room where we were all gathered and like make sure that I hadn't like missed anything. And then the last time that I left that room, I left and I followed this guy that I never saw his face, I don't think, to a room where there were 4 men doing like an Indian line dance. Like literally there was 3 other men who were following this Indian man who was dancing to like really upbeat music. And there was a lot of students gathered around. And then there was a big group of students that were kind of following the footwork, or trying to. It was like really complex. And even though I'm a dancer, I remember standing there and I kind of was like, I don't know if I'm going to like be able to grasp this. Like this is really complex. I really wanted to try, but I never actually joined in. And then there was other students all around this big space that were just kind of like standing or sitting around talking. And so eventually I was like, okay, I feel like I want to like make my way back to my group of classmates now. And for some reason, I left the guy that I had come in there with. Like I had no idea where he was. So I started the venture alone. And I was so sure that we hadn't gone too far away from the room where we started in order to find this room. So I was like, oh, I'll be fine. Like I'll be able to do it alone. So I thought that I was going the way that I was supposed to. And I came to this door and it opened into just darkness. And I felt really uneasy. I was like, like I've been here before, and I know that it was a really uneasy feeling last time I was in this situation. It was kind of like I've had to make this decision before, and oh my gosh, I know this feeling. So then I was like, wait a second. I can actually make a conscious decision to just go into this with a completely different intention and mentality. So I just took a really deep breath and I just stepped into the darkness. And in that moment, I knew that I was choosing differently. That was a really wild feeling, and I can still literally picture this dream. It was so cool. It was so like woman coming into power, realizing that the darkness doesn't have to be scary. Anyway, that turns into a series of all these unfamiliar staircases and hallways of all different kinds and all different vibes. And there is a little bit of like unease throughout all of this, and at the same time I knew that I was so supported and that like it was going to be okay. And in these staircases and hallways there was no one around. Like I was not able to see a soul. And then eventually I popped out into an area where there were people, and I was so excited. I was like, oh my god, finally, like someone's gonna be able to tell me where to go. So I decided to ask for help, and people were so amazed that I wasn't able to find my way. But then other people were like, wait, you're like so far away from where you wanted to go back to your room. Like this is nowhere near that. Like I don't even know how to get back there. Eventually I found this teacher that kind of seemed like a, middle school teacher vibe. And she gave me like some general direction. And so I was like, okay, I guess I'll like try to follow that and remember what she said. And then I walked through like some outdoor complex of the school, and then I like popped out through another series of like hallways and tunnels that were outdoors. I popped out into like an elementary school rather than like the university where I had started. And I'm like, oh, this is not right. Like, but it felt really light and bright and like kind of fun. And I was like, okay, like I could vibe with this, but like I still feel like I need to get back to where my class was. Eventually, I was able to find my way back to the building that I actually wanted to be in, and it felt like I was kind of going through some like outdoor staircases. A lot of them were like made of metal, but then some like underground, like tunnel vibe. Eventually, I get to this cafeteria, and I saw some of the classmates that I was with before, and they had kind of all migrated to the cafeteria. They were no longer in the room where we all started. And I told them the story, and they were like shocked. They were like, oh my God, like you've been on a journey. But they didn't really offer much like comfort or support. And like I was still pretty shook. And then I realized like, wait, my phone and like all my things are in this other room where we all started together. Like I need to go get them. And then someone was like, wait, if you had your phone with you this whole time, like you wouldn't have run into any of this. You could have called someone and asked them like, how do I get back to where we are? So everyone else was like eating in this cafeteria, and instead of like ditching my stuff and being like, whatever, I don't really need them, I decided, no, I really need my phone. I really need my belongings. Like I need to go venture and find my things. At this point, I found out that basically everything in the building besides the cafeteria was closed, except for like, I saw some faculty members kind of wandering here or there, like gathering last minute things, but it literally felt like end of school vibes where like everyone was about to leave the building. So from the cafeteria, because I had made it there, it actually seemed like it was going to be a pretty simple journey to go to the room that I needed to go to. And I thought I remembered where I was going. Along the way, I ran into a couple people that already heard my story of like getting lost from my group of classmates and like leaving my belongings and stuff. Like they had heard about it through the grapevine. And I was like, oh, that's crazy that like you already know about this. Like I just told people about this. I didn't know anyone else knew. And then I kept going. And as I kept going, things got darker and darker. And then like no one was around me again. And then eventually, like way later, a series again of doors, hallways, staircases, so many different ones. Eventually, I run into a professor and I ask for help again. And I'm like, yo, do you know where I'm going? And then she goes, oh yeah, I heard the story. And I was like, oh geez. I don't know why I did all this. I should have just stayed put like in the room. And then she said something that really threw me off guard in the dream and even now. She proceeded to talk about like, she's like, yeah, I know they shouldn't have put lavender into every dish in that coursed meal. Like that should have been brought to people's attention before tasting. And I was like, oh, you are not talking about the story that I was talking about. And I was super caught off guard. And I tried to briefly tell her my story, but like she didn't really seem too fazed, unlike everyone else that I had told. So I had met her in this like staircase, and that was like dimly lit. And so I kind of walked up the staircase, and then she just kind of disappeared. And I went through the doorway, like up the stairs that she was coming down from. And then once again, I was on my own, and I was like through this series of doorways and halls and rooms, and there was like some cozy rooms, there was like some rooms with music on, there was some rooms with just like a couple of chairs. There was one like kind of dungeon vibes room, but like there was this one guy in there that was like playing guitar, and it wasn't bad vibes, like not like, I don't know how to say not bad dungeon vibes, but it wasn't. It was just like really dark and like moody, and I was like, okay, gotta go, guy, bye. So anyway, I never ended up making it back where I actually intended to go. And then at a certain point, I kind of intentionally woke up because I realized in my dream that I would never be able to actually get all the way back to where I wanted to go. And I was like, oh, also, this is a dream, so it doesn't actually matter that some of my stuff is like probably locked in some room at this point. That was my dream. Then I woke up and I had this like, oh my God, I need to write this down right now, which is why I was just able to recount that entire very vivid dream to you. Now, like I said, when I very first started describing it, I feel like just by hearing even bits and pieces, it's very easy to understand like certain symbols within this dream and like what they mean. However, I really wanted to go deep with this, so I gave ChatGPT a specific prompt. And I said, hey, I need you to act as a dream interpreter. Take every detail that I say into account. Don't skim over the story. Really read and interpret it. Give me logical and spiritual meaning behind everything. It feels like it was really detailed and important with the purpose of my development and growth. I just really need some help into digging deep of why. And I want to share with you some of the insights that it gave because it was so powerful. And believe me, I am not one to like sit here and be like, ChatGPT this and ChatGPT that. And like, I try to use it sparingly because I know that most of the time it's just like kicking out what you want to hear. But I really feel like this dug deeper than I was able to get on my own. And mind you, I want to point out, am very intentional in my use in that before I go to ChatGPT for anything, I try to come up with my own conclusions and my own interpretations, especially when it comes to dreams first, and then use it to kind of like add on to that. So like I said, I already had a really good understanding of what all those rooms and staircases were. I had a pretty good understanding of like why the light switch only turned on behind me and not in front of me. That all made sense to me, and I'll dive into that here. But I just felt like there was more that I was missing. I'm just basically going to read its responses like verbatim because I just feel like it was so good. It said, Rachel, wow, this one is layered. It's got such an initiatory liminal energy to it. Like your subconscious is literally walking you through the architecture of your own evolution right now. The level of detail and repetition in this dream means it's one of those teaching dreams, the kind that keeps coming back because it's mapping your internal growth and testing how comfortable you've become with the unknown. Let's unpack it deeply so you can feel what your psyche and soul are showing you right now. So the core theme was definitely navigating old identities and new ones while learning to trust your own light in the dark. So it said energetic signature, initiation, transition, individuation, the part of you that's outgrowing old systems and trying to orient in a totally new paradigm, spiritually, professionally, and maternally. This is a labyrinth dream. Your higher self is walking your conscious mind through the architecture of your own psyche to show how far you've come, where you still grasp for control, and how your intuition lights your path when logic can't. This is something that I had already come to the conclusion of on my own. However, I feel like it just put it into such better words. So here it's breaking down a logical and psychological interpretation of each kind of like part of the dream that was very clear. So then it starts to break down the logical and psychological interpretations of each symbol within this dream. So the first one being the university setting, and it says you're in a place of advanced learning. This points to self-mastery and integration. It's your graduate level of life lessons. Being with classmates that you don't necessarily recognize in waking life may be representative of archetypal parts of you learning alongside one another. These are your inner selves, like the healer, the student, the teacher, the artist coexisting. And I really loved that piece because that is not something that I had interpreted on my own, and it really, really resonates. The closing circle and pizza party represents completion energy. Also, pizza is my favorite food, so not surprised that that's what made its way into the dream. It says you're graduating from one stage of life. This likely mirrors the endings and transitions you're currently experiencing: marriage, pregnancy, moving homes, career recalibration. The closing circle hints that you know this is sacred closure, not just logistics. The wandering and the line dance. The dance scene shows joy, community, expression you haven't fully joined yet. This kind of felt like a pain point for me because I'm like, I feel like I have, and at the same time, if I really am truly honest with myself, there are aspects of that I have not fully tapped into as of recently because I've been kind of in like a cocoon stage. It says the upbeat Indian line dance represents rhythmic devotion, collective movement, something you admire but don't yet feel ready to step into. It's your soul showing the next frequency you'll move into when you feel safe enough to rejoin the dance of life fully. Stepping into the darkness and malfunctioning light switches, it's a textbook symbol of the unconscious. You're learning that illumination doesn't come from the external switch, meaning control, logic, or other people's validation, but from your own inner vision. The lights behind you, you've already illuminated the past, but to evolve, you have to walk into what's still unknown, trusting that your awareness itself will light the way. Made so much sense. I already kind of gained that one, but again, I feel like it put it into better words than I could have. The next symbol is getting lost, asking for help, and then being in the wrong building, which was the elementary school. It says you literally regress from grad school to elementary school. It's revisiting foundations. This often happens when we're growing rapidly. We need to revisit early lessons, childhood conditioning, root safety, innocence before integrating new levels of wisdom. It's like your psyche saying, before you graduate spiritually, go back and tend to the inner child who still feels scared when lost. This was huge because I hadn't necessarily taken that from this. I hadn't thought too much about the fact that I was back in the elementary school, besides the fact that it felt like warm and light compared to the dark hallways. But this made so much sense to me. And I actually talk to clients all the time. And I talk about during my retreats that I host all the time that it's really important to go back. It's kind of like reviewing the lessons before you move forward. Like, before you go into a final exam in school, you go back and you review chapters 1, 2, and 3 to make sure you still have all those foundational skills. And this is the same thing, but in the spiritual world. The next symbol was lost belongings, or like my lost phone. The belongings in the dream represent identity, grounding tools, and sense of self. And then the phone represents connection to intuition and external guidance. So it said that losing them means you're being asked to disconnect from constant external feedback and rely on inner orientation. Oh my God, this made so much sense that this dream came up right now, because I have honestly been consuming way more social media lately in the last like 3 months than I have like in years. And it has been a little bit draining and exhausting, but that's because I've been just in this state of just being and not in a creative state up until very recently during this pregnancy. And now I'm like, okay, we got the fire under our booty. Like, we are ready to create. And it feels so good. So I am not surprised that this symbol popped up in my dream and reminded me that I am on the right trajectory. This one I found super interesting. So when everyone in my dream was saying, if you had your phone, you'd be fine. You could have like called someone to help you. Chat says it mirrors your old self-belief that safety comes from external resources or others telling you what to do, or in my case, big time external validation. But this dream insists your navigation must come from within, which is so funny because that's something that I preach all the time. You guys know this. But for some reason, we have to relearn those same lessons that we teach other people over and over and make sure that we're walking the talk, right? The next symbol was the professors, and then the meal, like lavender conversation with that one. So the professors represent inner authority figures or mentors, and the lavender meal like tasting comment is random for a reason, it says. It shows how outer authority may not always understand your personal journey. Lavender is calming and cleansing. So spiritually, it's a subtle nod to self-soothing. You can trust your own discernment over others' misaligned advice. Also very resonant for where I'm at in my journey, because I have made a conscious decision to not listen to all of the fucking noise around pregnancy, specifically on social media, but also just like when you're pregnant, like people are excited for you. They want to share their experience. And so they're sharing it from a place of love, but everyone has something to say about their experience, about your experience, and I'm honestly sick of it. And I've decided that I am approaching this pregnancy from my own intuition, and I am just going to shut off all the noise, and it's felt really fucking good. And same thing goes for the redirection in my business. It is so easy to compare myself to everyone else out there doing similar things, embodiment coaching, retreats, workshops. But I am different than them, and I have different goals than them, and I have different gifts than them, and I have different intuitive abilities. And so I need to just literally dance to the beat of my own drum. And I feel like this was yet another confirmation of that. And then the other interpretation that it had was ending by choosing to wake up. You realized you were dreaming and you chose to release the need to find your stuff. That's profound self-awareness. It shows you're beginning to detach from the illusion of control and trust that what's meant for you will remain even when you stop grasping. The concept of attachment to outcomes has been very, very, very prominent in my life for the last year or so. And I feel like I'm finally at a place where I have been able to detach from outcomes so much more deeply than ever before. And that has allowed me to really, truly detach from this control, this need to know exactly what it looks like, because things have been turning out even better than I could have ever imagined lately in life. And I want that trajectory to keep going. Now it goes into the spiritual and symbolic interpretations. So the labyrinth initiation, this dream is an initiation into navigating new dimensions of self, motherhood, higher service, embodiment, leadership. You're between identities, walking through dim hallways of your psyche where you haven't yet turned on the light. The darkness is the womb. You're literally pregnant. The dream mirrors gestation. Creation happens in darkness first. That sentence, my mind was like, pew! Creation happens in darkness first. Oh my gosh. You can apply this to so many different things. Like, I think of where I was a couple of years ago when I was in the deepest, darkest depression of my life, and I thought I would never be the same again. I was not able to like just smile or dance or any of the things that usually bring me so much joy. I literally physically could not. And then so much, this huge burst of creation came on the other side, and I completely switched up my business. I completely switched up my life, and now I'm happier than I've ever been and so much more aligned. So that really, really resonated. That line hit. Creation happens in darkness first. And I hope that if you take anything from this podcast, that line hits for you too, because it's so powerful. Next symbol is the doors and rooms. Those, it says, represent potential realities, which makes a lot of sense, right? Like you're opening the door, you're seeing what's there. So it says potential realities you're exploring. Some are locked because it's not time yet, and then some open easily because they're aligned. Totally makes sense, right? The hallways represent the in-between, where you can't cling to what's known, but you have to keep moving with faith. I feel like in life there are so many like in-between moments where we're like, okay, I guess I'm just going to keep moving, like don't really have another choice. And then it ends up turning out fine. The next one was the teacher figures are simply spirit guides, showing you how to bridge old lessons with new understanding. Makes so much sense. I feel like I kind of got that representation on my own as well. The elementary school is about reparenting your inner child before the next quantum leap. Now, I just recorded a TikTok all about how we, as a collective at my festival wedding, did a quantum leap, which I should record an episode about, so stay tuned. Maybe that'll be the next one. But it's so true. We literally just quantum leaped. Like, I can feel it. Like, everything feels different and bright and exciting and airy. And I'm like, okay, yeah. Continuing to reparent that inner child, which I've already done a ton of work on this year, but continuing that before I birth a child is so important, which I'm sure will be another quantum leap when I birth a child. Like, oh my God, how could it not be? You're literally a portal. So it said, spiritually, this dream says you've learned a lot, but mastery now means trust. The universe is asking you to stop trying to get back to what's known, the old room, the group, the certainty, the belongings, and instead embrace that you're being led to a completely new building and a higher level of consciousness. Amen. Oh my God. Yes, yes, yes. Resonated so much. Its last little note was what your soul might be saying, which also felt so resonant. It said, stop trying to get back to where you began. You're meant to be here in the corridor between who you were and who you are becoming. The light switch doesn't work because you are the light source now. I still get chills when I read that. I feel like I need to like make that my like screensaver or something. That is so powerful, almost as powerful as creation starts from the darkness. Anyway, like I said, this felt so important to share with you because maybe you are also in this transitional period. I have found over the last year that most people that end up coming to my workshops, my retreats, or just coming to me and having conversations happen to be in a transitional period in life. So I'm really personally looking at this dream as an initiation into like my newest archetype of self, and it's like a complete map of rebirth. Like I let go of the idea that I had to return to that classroom, that I had to return to those belongings, and now I am prepared to like teach my own class, right? Like to really work on integrating all of those parts of self, like purpose and embodiment and grief and joy and sadness and motherhood and everything in between. And knowing that it's okay that things feel dark sometimes, that every single time your soul evolves, it starts with kind of walking through dimly lit hallways and knowing that the light is within you. So you really don't need to see exactly where it is that you're going. And then eventually, everything behind you starts to light up, and then you can see things in front of you a little bit more. I did end up sharing one more thing with chat as I was reflecting on all of this. I was like, something came up that I feel like is really interesting. And I said to chat, if there's anything you're able to go deeper on without reaching really far just to give me an answer, let me know. And so I said, hey, so every time I found a teacher, they were actually warm. Like, even though I was in a dark hallway, sometimes they were really warm and like seemed like they wanted to help me, but they weren't actually always helpful. And it gave some really interesting insight into that. It said, these figures are archetypal mirrors of benevolent authority. People are energies that mean well, but can't actually guide you through your own terrain. Psychologically, they represent all the mentors, practitioners, systems, or even inner experts you've tuned into during your healing, health, or spiritual growth journey. They reflect a phase where you outgrew outsourced wisdom. That felt really powerful. It says you've learned how to learn. Now the curriculum is trusting your own discernment, even when others are kind, credible, or comforting. And that's really big. Spiritually, these teachers are the universe's gentle way of saying the next level of your initiation can't be taught. It can only be embodied. So they weren't wrong. They were just placeholders for an older way of seeking. Their warmth shows that you've healed enough to attract loving guides instead of harmful ones. But their lack of practical help shows that you're graduating from seeking help to being your own authority. The reason that feels so resonant for my own journey right now is because ever since I found out I was pregnant, it has felt like such an intuitive, deep, loving spiritual journey. And it doesn't feel like anything that I need anyone to tell me what to do with. It just feels natural. And honestly, I never thought that I would be saying that because I never even knew if I wanted to have a kid before for a really long time. But then once it started being clear to me that that was part of my path on this journey in this lifetime, that like I was meant to bring life onto this earth, it just kind of clicked and like really made sense and just felt like, wow, this is going to be powerful. And then after all of this reflection, I realized the reason that I threw up yesterday didn't necessarily have to be because I'm pregnant. Because a lot of times our human mind clings to like the things that we can see and feel in this 3D reality. When in actuality, I think what happened is I needed to energetically purge because my soul knew it was about to go on this journey and about to show my human self on that subconscious level, hey, we're moving on. Like we've gotten through these certain steps. We've gotten past these lessons. Now it's time to move on. And I need to take your hand and bring you with me. But that wouldn't have happened if I wasn't able to energetically purge. I'm hoping that you can glean something amazing for your own journey from this story time. And if this brought up anything for you, anything at all, I would love to hear it. Please reach out to me at Playful Embodiment on all platforms. I am really excited to continue to be on my A game with recording episodes. And other than that, until next time, keep shining, keep aligning, and we'll talk soon.